Of course, when we're talking about peer learning, it can take many forms. A very popular form of peer learning is that of an older student helping out a younger student, because that student, the older one that is, has much more experience than that younger student, probably because has met with the difficulties that this student, the younger student, currently and has to deal with. And of course, because it's this age gap that also gives this feeling that there is somebody who is older and can have, let's say, the authority to be able to instruct and give some pieces of advice to a younger student. However, because today, as we mentioned, we're going to be focusing on peer learning and how it can be practiced through some practical ideas, some practical tips that are recommended in the forthcoming slides. We're talking about a classroom setting. I think that it's most likely that you do not have different levels in a specific class. So peer learning in that form has to do mainly with homework activities. It has to do mainly with tasks to be handled during the weekend, and of course, extracurricular ongoing activities that the school might also have arranged for students to work and collaborate with, which is just perfectly wonderful, actually, if you are to ask me. Perfectly, more than perfectly fine. However, we need to foster also this idea in the classroom setting. For what reason? Because, of course, it brings about a couple of benefits. We wouldn't be doing this webinar without without it having some benefits, right? So I'm going to go on and show all these points, because I'm not going to be reading all these out one by one, in order for you to be able to get an idea what is it that more or less comes along with peer learning. And if I am to skim through some of these points that are mentioned here, we can see that a lot of the components of what comprises the 21st century competencies has to do with the importance of having peer learning incorporated in class as well, and of course outside the classroom setting. Collaboration: students learn to collaborate and learn from one another. This is a result of collaboration, of course, when it's done properly, and there are no inhibitions regarding to that. Students also take in charge of their own learning, but also of their organizational and planning skills. That is, when is it that they are gonna arrange to meet after class, or what is it that they have to focus on, go through the entire step-by-step process in order to be able to deliver a specific product, the task that you have assigned them to do. It's also an opportunity for them to evaluate their own learning. So this brings that autonomous learning that we have been talking about in regarding the 21st century competencies that are to be met. Students learn to receive and give constructive feedback to each other, which is really important, because it's something that's not coming from the so-called figure of authority, which is the teacher, let's say, which is the undeniable correction that the teacher is making, but it is constructive feedback because it's differently passed on as feedback that is being given by a classmate who has gone through the same process in order to give you to work on this assignment together. And of course, one of the most important things is that it fosters a culture of community, while it also develops those soft skills. There is preparation, and this preparation that is taking place also involves for the final project, involves all the steps to the learning process. So all these are definitely important benefits that come from peer learning, which is more or less, if you are to label it differently, also group work activities. Now, the question is, can we find room for peer learning in class when we have that typical, as I tend to mention a lot of times, 45 to 50-minute lesson? How much time can it take? How much it will be a struggle for me to be able to meet with the demands of this specific lesson and the presentation that I have to deliver to my students and meet the time criteria that has been set, right, according to the curriculum. Yes, the truth is that there is no answer to this regarding how much you can deal with time, but the truth is that it does require some training for us, on behalf of us, but of course, train the students to be able to deal with specific activities that have a specific target, and therefore, and time limit is definitely imposed on that because we don't have endless time. Things that make us go home, things that make us probably skeptical about incorporating, us as teachers, that is, incorporating peer learning activities in class have to do, first of all, with the student inexperience. I would also add our inexperience in not focusing on this standing before the whiteboard, blackboard, and pointing out, and just letting the students to do a lot of interaction. So it has to do with training definitely the students and us, of course, to be able to assign these activities in class with a time limit. I would say that student hesitancy and the lack of confidentiality are two points that actually more or less intertwine, because it has to do also with creating this classroom setting that is very accommodating for peer learning, because there are many occasions where you have that student who is pretty much advanced, or rather much more advanced in comparison to their classmates, that feels like there is the teacher number two in class. So of course this has some bad results, in the sense that the student who wants to show off does not really help the rest of the group shine in this peer learning activity that has to do. And it's also, I would label it as a part of student experience as well, because it is something that requires guidance as well. Or there are students that do not get along well together, so this is quite challenging. And of course, you don't want all the time to have the same pairs or groups. The synthesis of the groups should not be always the same, as to be able to rotate and give different groups the opportunity, and of course blend the students in order to get different ways of working with their classmates. And of course, yes, something that I have been receiving a lot from the schools that I get to visit when I come, when I pay a visit to a lot of the countries, and this is a global problem. Let me take the opportunity to share this now that we've got attendance from many different countries. So this is, the parental interference is a global, it's a universal problem. So it doesn't happen only in Egypt, in Greece, and Turkey, and Ukraine, and Russia, in Algeria, in Morocco, or in Peru, Thailand, and Mexico. It happens everywhere. Parents are always skeptical about, first of all, activities that may require the combination of having to do, let's say, more or less these activities, which require a lot of interaction, which makes a lot of noise, because of course they cannot interact muted. And this means that noise is probably not productive in class, it's just noise. But no, of course, uh, I mean, getting the parents to understand can happen only through the way that we can go through the previous steps and train our students to be able to uh, make the most of their group activities, and of course the interactions that they get. Uh, Nice to see you all. Nice to see you all. Thank you for your messages that are coming in. Hello, Selma. Nice to see you again through the comment that you are making in Algeria. So, peer study groups now. And yes, we mentioned before about the contribution of getting the students in a situation where they need to take charge of their own learning, and of course organize their group. So they need to organize how they're gonna be able to meet and conduct with this project. This is what happens when a peer study group is arranged. And of course, it gets them to think also about the environment that this interaction takes place if it is out of school, but of course, also get them trained for what it is that they have to work targeting on that specific thing that you assign them to do when it comes to a peer teaching activity that is done in class. So let's get